Hi everyone, this is 201A. I just finished the 5-hour comfort zone debate. I have a bit of a cough, so I might cough during this video, but I really want to recap it for you guys because this was the type of thing that even in HK discussion you don't see very often. So basically this debate started with someone complaining about Oro and Mato in R5, and now I didn't realize that he's talking about the P1 section in R5, which did cause a bit of a misunderstanding and a bit of a fault on my part. But you can see, beginning of this debate, Rose is the first one who points out that really you need to be very consistent at all the bosses. 80% is just not going to cut it for R5. Like, it's not even close to. In fact, if you can calculate your chance of beating R5 if you have a 50% consistency at every boss in Radiant Hall of Gods. That's 0.5 to the 42nd power, so it comes out to be 2.27 times 10 to the negative 13, which I believe is 1 in 23 trillion, 22.7 trillion, I believe. I could be wrong with that number, but I do know for a fact it's 2.27 times 10 to the negative 13. That is your chance of beating R5 if you have a 50% consistency every single boss in Radiant Hall of Gods. And bear in mind, that's more than most Radiant Hall of Gods victors. This is going to come up later in the argument. But again, when this person is asking, how do I do R5? This got me thinking, well, if you're having trouble with Oro and Mato, you really shouldn't be doing R5. This is where I say, okay, this looks like a comfort zone, because if someone is trying to do R5, but they're having this much trouble with Oro and Mato, they probably shouldn't be doing it. So this person is the one who disagrees with me, and his main claim, well, I guess I don't know, their main claim is basically that you can determine. Well, they have several main claims. As this debate's going to continue, you're going to see some more of them. But the first one is basically, and this is probably, I don't know, this is one of the more interesting ones, is that you can move, let's say, from Radiant Hall of Gods level to R5 level, because first, this is based on two principles. First off, you can move between Hall of Gods and normal Pantheon 5. In fact, Hall of Gods is the best way to practice for normal Pantheon 5, so it follows using this line of reasoning that Radiant Hall of Gods is the best way to practice for Radiant Pantheon 5. And then the other thing is that you can use a certain streak in Hall of Gods. Like, for example, you get, let's say, 5 or 10 or 15, 20 bosses Radiant in a row. That means you're ready to do it in R5. So my issue with this line of reasoning, and the reason why I consider it to be sort of like a comfort zone, is because there's still no like secondary achievement you're going to. Now, if you somehow make these boss streaks your achievement, then sure, I guess that can avoid the comfort zone trap. But I find probably the best way to avoid becoming in a comfort zone is probably to have like Pantheon 5 all bindings, or Pantheon 5 all bindings lifeblood list, or even Ascended between Pantheon 5 and R5. Or you can have so many different challenges, but just moving straight, Radiant Hall of Gods in R5, but you get the point. Simply moving straight to R5 is way too big of a jump, and chances are pretty good you're going to comfort zone it. So that's essentially how the debate starts. But so again, a lot of people have sort of a problem with the idea of comfort zones, and again, there's no precise definition of comfort zones. This is going to come up a bit later. Sorry, I had to drink. But comfort zone is sort of defined qualitatively, and there's sort of a set of different attributes that are are sort of part of a lot of comfort zones, I guess you could say. Comfort zones is a thing that really, I feel like when you explain it to top level players, normally they'll understand what you're talking about, even if you don't give a definition, which, by the way, we don't have a precise definition. I'm going to try to work with some other comfort zone students to try to come up with the best definition I can, but yeah, there's not like a super precise definition yet, and that's okay because most top players know what a comfort zone is, and when I just give them the attributes, like, oh, someone who, let's say, thinks that, who can, let's say, get a challenge, let's say, get a specific time on Pantheon 1, wants this time, does not have this time yet, but feels like the best way to do it is just to grind for it because they can get it. And they can get it semi-realistically. Like this type of, just these qualitative descriptions of, are like, that's enough for a top level player, if that makes any sense. But, and so that's one of the big challenges with me trying to explain it to someone who's like Pantheon 5 level. They really might not understand what a Hollow Knight comfort zone is, which is fine. The one thing that I did find a bit frustrating in this debate, though, was that there were a couple times, well, in sort of the first half of the debate, where I explained what a comfort zone was several times, and I feel like, well, I gave sort of these descriptions of, oh, a comfort zone player normally approaches a challenge like this, and then it just sort of got ignored, which was a bit irritating. So Fink right here points out that I sometimes consider challenges comfort zones by default, and yes, this is true. So I'll give an example real quick. Sorry, I had to drink more water, but yeah. Lumos recently pointed out one aspect of comfort zones is that normally it has a combination of the challenge being short and there being high RNG. So the best example of this is Any Radiance, which is a challenge that I consider to be a comfort zone by default. And the reason is because if it's your first time beating Any Radiance, you need to get good RNG to beat it, and it's a very short challenge. So, and there's also, like, I mean, there's probably some mods you can use to practice Phase 5 or something, but I don't know. It's the type of thing that people are very likely to just do over and over again until they beat it. Like, in fact, that's probably the only way you can do it, and it's sort of a comfort zone by default because there's very limited, like, ways to practice and learn new strategies other than just doing the boss over and over again until it works. That's how Hall of Gods challenges often end up going, but yeah, for practice, Hall of Gods is not a comfort zone. Although, again, comfort zoners can try to use it to make a jump way bigger than what they should be making, if that makes any sense. Again, I did admit it was a miscommunication, although I'll say again, him saying, how do I beat R5, didn't really help, and he did clarify that he meant the first 10 bosses very early in this discussion, and I accepted that, and then this got brought up again and again, and this right here, this is already, well, this is only 10 minutes of the discussion, but this gets brought up again and again and again by this person in particular, which was a little frustrating for me. But now I will say he does kind of have a good point that I do sometimes throw this term around, but like, I mean, it's HK discussion, so I won't say he doesn't have a point, but like, I do feel like when we're actually discussing comfort zone theory and like the merits it holds, which there are people out there who think that comfort zone theory is just this, it just is this meritless idea. If we're having that discussion, then I feel like it's a little pedantic to just go on and on about this one thing that happened at the beginning of the discussion, which, first off, the person was not very clear about, and second off, got addressed at the beginning of the discussion. So, yeah. Let's continue until Bonk shows up. Bonk is going to show up at some point. So, again, I used Bonk as an example of a comfort zoner. And this isn't because I don't like Bonk. Bonk, right? I have no problem with comfort zoners. And again, Bonk is not necessarily the best example of a comfort zoner. He might not even be a comfort zoner. The reason why I considered him a comfort zoner is because he got salty at Lumos for getting a better time with less effort, which shows better efficiency. Again, Lumos has like 3 times his playtime, so, you know, maybe he's not a comfort zoner, who knows. He did get salty though, so like, just arguing that, okay, so then he makes this claim. Also, the whole idea of comfort zones doesn't exist. And this is where I kind of go ballistic. I'll find his weirdest argument that he makes, and this is basically the main argument that, well, okay, first off he says this, and if you practice Rad PV you get better at combat. So yes, this is true. But if you've done Rad PV for, let's say, 50 hours in a row, that's not as good as if you've been doing Pantheons for 50 hours in a row. Like, okay, for Rad PV it might be better, but like, the overall improvement just isn't going to be as much. Like, improvement sort of curves off, because like, after you've put in a certain amount of hours, you know every attack Pure Vessel is going to ever do. You put in some more hours, you know, you know like every single combination that can happen. You know how to dodge everything perfectly. Put in some more hours, you start learning tech. You put in some more hours, you're learning more advanced tech. But if you're at the more advanced tech level, there's no way you're going to be learning any new attacks or any new dodges or any new combinations. So you've moved past that level, and there's just not as much you're going to get out of it compared to if, let's say, you're progressing steadily on every other boss. Then you'll go through all the other levels and you'll be getting the most for your time. Now, obviously, if you're doing it steadily, there's going to be a point where you move past combinations and basic tech and you start learning advanced tech, stuff like that, sure, but that will make you better overall than if you're just doing, because like obviously it's going to curve off there too, but it's curving off for the whole thing, not just for one boss, right? You will be in the, let's say, you'll be in the phase where you're learning a lot for much longer. So yeah, Bonk does ask for a description of comfort zones. I did give him one. So at this point I should point out that I did have to go play, or my brother wanted me to play Team Fortress 2, so I went and played with him. This sort of made it a little harder for me to address some of these arguments. So this is where I sort of started repeating myself often. But Bonk was, not gonna lie, kind of repeating himself too. I don't know if I can find a message where he says it. Okay, yeah, so here, he says your presentation of it completely changed. Or changed completely. This was literally the main thing that Bonk brought to the table in this debate, was that comfort zone theory changes, which, yes, that's true, it has changed with like the new developments Lumos has brought to the table, but like, the point is, that's just making the idea more robust. That's not a bad thing that it's changing. And secondly, his idea that I just keep changing on the fly isn't true. Like, I give different examples of the comfort zone mentality and like things that contribute to comfort zones. So like, I don't know. I find this a pretty puzzling take. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, Bonk, you're awesome. You did not bring that much to the table in this debate. Like, yeah, really not that much. Bonk sort of just went around in circles over and over again in this debate. Like, it was a little frustrating. Again, at this point I was playing Team Fortress 2, so I could only respond when I died, so normally my responses were just one-liners. But, And I couldn't give my explanation of it again because, again, I only had 15 seconds to type each time, so I couldn't lay out a detailed explanation of like the different, I don't know, of like how comfort zones work. But so what was a little frustrating with Bonk is because I did give him a definition. I don't know if I can find it, but not only did I give the definition back before he showed up to the debate, which it would have been great if he went back and read it. I understand he probably didn't care to, but I then gave him I gave him an explanation of it too, and then he just sort of ignored it for the rest of the debate, which, like, I obviously can't type it again when I'm playing Team Fortress 2. And then, yeah, he just kept saying I keep changing it. I say that, well, first off, I'm just making it better by fixing the issues, and second off, it hasn't really changed today. Like, it hasn't completely changed at all, and it definitely hasn't changed today. Which he's like saying that I have two different examples of comfort zones, because again, there can be different things that like contribute to a comfort zone. Like, not every comfort zone challenge is short, and there's different things that can contribute to the comfort zone mentality. So like me giving these two different examples doesn't mean it's not a thing.
We should study the psychology of a comfort zone. What goes on in someone's brain when they're in a comfort zone.
Yeah, unfortunately it's not something that's really been done much of, but it would give us a lot of useful.
Quantum has been our best.
Yeah, sure, we can study
yeah.
Quantum on the various mechanistics of the comfort zone. Again, here I got a little annoyed because I said many times that limited skill set is indicative of comfort zones. That's never has been how I define comfort zones. So yeah, skill issue at this point says something that I think is absolutely hilarious. He says, so I say that the concept of comfort zones is completely understandable. Skill issue says, but I refuse to define it, only indicators. That's like naming an illness, but only knowing its symptoms and not the actual causes. And I think this is an absolutely hilarious thing to say. Like, it's absolutely hilarious, because when the thing you notice about a disease, the thing you don't need to be a doctor to notice, is the symptoms, right? Like, and so the example I brought up was Alzheimer's disease, right? Obviously people have Alzheimer's disease. There are other neurodegenerative diseases like this. There's Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, right? And those are prion diseases, obviously, but the point is, we know these diseases exist. We're still not sure what causes them. This is like, so I don't even know what the point was, that a disease doesn't exist, that like you can have symptoms, but if you don't know the cause, the disease doesn't exist. Like, if that were a thing, then am I strawmanning his argument here? Like, this is so weird. This is one of the weirdest things that's said in the entire debate. Once I'm done with TF2, then I sort of can start debating again. Like, again, people just oversimplify comfort zones. So the reason why there hasn't been a definition is because there are like multiple contributing factors, and it's not like a cut and dry thing. So when people accuse it of not having a definition and then define it with like these like one sentence definitions, which not even the comfort zone students like myself have a one sentence definition. So then I point out like all of the other things involved that will have to, well, I don't even point out all of them, but I point out some of the other things involved that will have to go into a definition. And then, yeah, he just asks for one of them. But again, this idea that that there can only be one facet of comfort zone when I've literally just listed many different ones. He asks about this one, and then says that, oh, well, this is different from the others, so therefore you're contradicting yourself. No. Okay, so this gets us to, in my opinion, the most boring phase of the entire argument. Okay, so this is the idea that the term comfort zone is flawed and has to be changed. This is annoying to me because, like, who cares what it's called? Yeah, a lot of people, when they hear the term, they're like, oh, comfort zone must be comfortable. So therefore, the term comfort zone is incorrectly applied. Like, well, okay, that's not even my problem. My problem is, oh, it must be comfortable, so therefore comfort zone theory is wrong. Like, I realize they're not saying that, but like, I don't understand why you would even put that into a debate. Like, it's just arguing semantics. Like, admit that comfort zone theory is true if you're, well, anyway, they do debate comfort zone theory mechanistically later on, so I shouldn't say that, but yeah, I found this to be extremely boring. Also, the idea that comfort zones are inherently comfortable isn't true. Like, I mean, like, conventional comfort zones, not Hollow Knight comfort zones. Like, I point out here that you can have a job, you can absolutely hate it, but if you keep going to it over and over again, because that's where you're, like, because, like, you feel in control of your position when you're just going to the job, because you know you can go here every day, you know you can get money even though it sucks and you don't want to be there. That's a comfort zone. So comfort zoning has nothing to do with it, with first off you being proficient at it. Like, that has nothing to do with the definition of comfort zones. And second off, you don't have to be enjoying it at all for it to be a comfort zone. In fact, I would argue for most comfort zones, you probably, like, don't want to be doing it. Like, you might want the goal, right? For the job you hate, you might want to get paid. That might be your goal, but, like, if you're grinding Pantheon 1 and you want to get, let's say, a sub 3 and you have a ridiculous number of attempts, your goal might be to get the sub 3. That doesn't mean you enjoy the ridiculous number of attempts. Now, a comfort zone doesn't mean you have to hate the thing you're doing, but it has literally nothing to do with you enjoying it. It has nothing to do with the conventional definition. It has nothing to do with the Hollow Knight definition that's used by comfort zone students. So, this is just not a good point. And, okay, yes, many people, when they hear the word comfort, they think of comfort. Sure, that's like, sure, but, okay, I will grant that that's a valid point. A lot of people hear that term, they think something else. That is a valid point. So, yeah, just more arguing. Basically, my main point here is that, the term doesn't necessarily have to have much to do with what the thing actually is, even though, again, I think that the Hollow Knight comfort zone isn't that far off what a conventional comfort zone is, but yeah, if we're arguing mechanistically, I think it's a little weird to bring up semantics. Now, semantics, like I said, I'll grant that's a fair point, but it felt a little weird, especially because it was brought up in the middle of this debate. Okay, so here we get back to this main argument, and this is where I finally get someone on my side, which is Zeem. So, basically, the argument that he's making is that getting certain streaks in Radiant Hall of Gods can indicate consistency at R5, and yeah, what Zeem is saying first off is that just because you beat Radhog, you're like way far off of R5 level. I think he estimates that like there's probably 30,000 or so Radhog victors, probably only 300 players that are like are like R5 victors or at the level to go for R5 without comfort zoning it. Obviously you can technically comfort zone your way to it as long as you know how to beat the boss's Radiant, but the point is that that's not a very good idea. You're likely going to quit if you just try to jump straight from Radhog to R5, because there's like a giant chasm in between the two. And again, here we get to when I'm talking about having like thousands of attempts on P1 and not having a sub 3. I think that a balanced skill set really does help, because right, if you're running Pantheon 5, if you're running even like all Bindings Pantheons, let's say, you're going to have fought these bosses a lot more. It's just going to be a lot easier for you to approach these bosses, even if you haven't specifically run the strategy in Hall of Gods. And learning the strategy in Hall of Gods is also something you should be doing instead of just using your current strategies, even if they can get you a sub 3. Okay, so this brings us to sort of the last phase of the debate. This is where International Master Comet Killer joins. So yeah, Comet Killer's claim is basically, and he sort of changes the subject of this debate. I think he's definitely not wrong per se. Well, I disagree with him. He's not demonstrably wrong. Is that practicing in Hall of Gods is the most efficient form of practice. That I think, well, segment practice is what he says for a speedrun is the most efficient, and I think most people would agree with that, right? If you're learning True Ended, you don't want to be running the frickin' up until green path 80 bazillion times, because that way you're not getting any practice with the rest of the run. But if you're doing runs over and over, you are inevitably going to be resetting to those first few splits. So what you should be doing is going later into the run and doing segment practice there. So yeah, in that sense he's correct. What I don't agree with him on is the statement that segment practice is vastly more important than finishing runs. That I don't agree with now. He points out certain players. He points out Monsta, Spoonsay, and Alex. So what I'll say about this is that all of these players are sort of exceptions, right? Specifically in the case of Alex, he was known for not finishing a Pantheon 1, or sorry, not Pantheon 1, Path of Pain. He was known specifically for not finishing a Path of Pain run until he got the world record back when it was 201 point something. And now obviously he was able to get it, which is extremely impressive. But the point is, that's not how most Path of Pain speedrunners approach it, right? Now, Comet Killer is obviously right that segment practice is the most efficient, because all of these Path of Pain runners are doing tons and tons of segment practice. But the point still stands. I bet if you look through most of them, and I think simply the fact that Alex was famous for just doing segment practice and not finishing runs should prove my point that this is rare. For players to not be finishing runs, because if you're going for these secondary achievements, like let's say at a certain point you're going to go for world record, but you start with sub 220, sub 215, sub 210, etc., until you get down to that really low times. You can be proud of each one of those achievements, and you can shoot for each one of them. And I think this is particularly important on Pantheon 5 All Bindings, which is something that both me and Comet Killer have experience on. And Comet Killer is primarily practicing in Hall of Gods, but I brought up an example of a player who had practiced quite a bit in Hall of Gods and really hadn't gotten anywhere in Pantheon 5 All Bindings, and had never finished a run, right? Had finished segments, but had never finished a real run. And I think this is an example of what will happen to most players if they just do segment practice and never finish runs, because you really cannot expect Hall of Gods to carry you from nothing to sub 45. It can, but it's probably not going to. If you're a normal person, you probably don't have patience to sit in Hall of Gods and practice over and over until you actually reach that level. we do agree that both are important. I do agree with Kama that that segment practice is the most efficient. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this sort of recap of the comfort zone debate. Thanks for watching.